Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Secrets for an Inspirational Life. I hope that you are well. I hope that wherever you are today, there's a little bit of happiness, a sprinkling of joy, and there is peace and health in your life. Now, some of the most fascinating things that I have come across in my life so far is this beautiful alchemy of mysticism and magic and really the beauty of life, something that is really unexplainable in words. And I'm always honored to meet people that somehow vibrate on this similar frequency, because we're all vibrational beings, I believe, and each one of us has our own song, our own dance, and our own frequency. And sometimes we meet people that resonate that deeply within us. And it's these people really that become sort of part of our tribe, so to speak. And we have kindred spirits that understand us in a way that possibly a lot of people out there don't. And that is why today I am really honored, because I have a very, very interesting guest for you. He is an intuitive practitioner and the founder of the Tanglewood Project, and that is Nick Mussell. Nick is also an artist, a silversmith, a beekeeper, and he has really a life vocation of helping others to overcome some of the challenges that everyday life may present to them. His skills are unique. I've seen some of the work that he does as a silversmith, and it is beautiful, I have to say. He's a true artisan in his craft. And he has a special way also, which he's going to tell you all about, in communicating, because he used something that I would say is a unspoken language, a language of the heart. And this enables him to work with people that have a diverse range of stories. And this allows him to create environments where people can come into creativity, and the creativity somehow allows them to transcend any tragic stories, any dysfunctional stories, or just stories of life. You know, everything that we are living, somehow we can transcend into another realm of existence, the realm of the heart and the soul. So I think he's mystical, I think he's magical, and he weaves his life in that way with all the things that he does. And today he's going to share his wonderful experiences, his journey, and his stories with us. Welcome, Nick.
Hello.
Hello. Hello.
Wow. Amazing. I feel privileged to be here talking to you, Mimi, and as we've had a little bit of correspondence, and listening to your previous podcasts have just, as you say, it's about that connecting with tribe, and I feel very privileged to be selected for this, and hearing that those other people within their heart resonance putting things out in the world there, it's just really good to hear that other people are coming from a similar space. So I look forward to seeing what alchemy we can create between the two of us here this afternoon.
I'm sure it's going to be very beautiful, because I am honoured indeed that that you've come on the show today, Nick, because as I said to you earlier, it's something that there was something, you know, truly that it's a mysticism that resonates from all that you do in your work, and also in the sense of your presence. That was something that really was fascinating, because I can see that you can really transcend, in a way, a bridge to help people reach their own inner sanctuary. So thank you very much for coming today. And let's go back, as I always say, to the beginning. tell us a little bit, because I know you do so many different things, but let's begin somewhere. Tell us a little bit about your life and about what you do.
Okay. Going back to my roots, I was privileged within my life. I lived in a small village on the Hampshire-Surrey border, and I had access to. There was a small holding across the road from us, and she was an amazing lady, she was actually a university don up in Edinburgh University, teaching classical Spanish, and she gave it all up for the good life when she'd inherited this property. And she had it was a lodge to the big house, but she had 30 acres surrounding it, which had the tennis lawns and the woodland and some fields and all the old gardens there. But she turned it over to having a variety of animals. And she was a lady there on her own. And she knocked on the door when I was about 9-10 years old, saying, did I want to go across and help with the animals? And it allowed me to be able to just have free reign. I would get home from school and just go and submerge myself in the environment there, connecting with the animals that she kept, feeding them, and, the cycles of life and death on the farm there. But also it allowed me to wander the woods and go through the marshes and watch the snowdrops come up in the spring and the conkers ripen on the trees in the autumn, and just live within those kind of rhythms of the seasons. And, it's something which, looking back on, it was something which really wove itself into my soul, and that deep understanding of what nature is, and those things, those wheels that turn, that we are part of, which are, our modern day society spends, for that consumer society, we're very disconnected from. So part of my kind of creativity and working outside is just about taking that time to step into that and feel it and understand where we are within that. And it's been a theme that when I've stepped away from it in my life, that's when things become disconnected and the resonance goes. So the thread which ran throughout that for me was that connection with creativity, with art. So from a very early age, I would have things in my pockets which I would take home with me. And my mum said to me the other day, she remembers more than one occasion of having baby slow worms in my pockets. And it was, I'd have baby birds and things like that, but I would pick up those little gems that you found, like broken egg shells and skulls, and then I would come back and draw them and model them and sculpt them. So I defined myself in my younger years as an artist, which then propelled me on through into art college and that discovery of the different kind of influences and skills and things which I was able to pick up along the way. So when I left art college, I was suffering from ill health. I had glandular fever, which knocked me out of orbit for quite some time. And at the same time, this was the early, it was 1992, 93, recession had hit. So all those jobs which I was hoping I was going to get as a qualified graphic designer just weren't there. So with the illness, I then had to kind of step back and kind of go, okay, so what is it that I want to do with my life? So I set up a business called Visionary Ideas. I really didn't have a clue. I got a grant from the Prince's Youth Business Trust. I had a mentor who was a very dry, very traditional pen pusher of a guy, bless him, and I kind of burst onto the scene and had all these kind of crazy ideas how I was going to make a living. And I did it for 10 years, and I was privileged to be given some amazing commissions. I did a wonderful project. I was involved with building a 33-foot long yellow submarine for the World Wildlife Fund, and I made all the endangered species sculpted to go inside, and it toured around the country. But then I did other crazy things like making cocoa bean characters for Cadbury's World up in Birmingham. And then also doing private commissions. I did a commission which took me 9 months to do over about a year and a half, making a very, very detailed mirror, which was that kind of Art Nouveau-y arts and crafts kind of feel to it. And, and I did all sorts of other things in between which interested me. And I was living by the sea, and I had a boat, which if the weather was nice, I'd go off and go do a bit of fishing and then bring the fish back and make a sculpture and sell them to galleries and private buyers and things. So but the challenge with that is leading the creative life. It's a world of richness, but also there can be the gaps between that make it really, really hard, and you're always chasing for the next commission. So some of the commissions I got involved with were just to pay the bills, and it didn't sit quite right with me. And the stress that came with that, the creativity was then becoming something which was not what I was wanting to connect with in that way. So, and along the way, I met somebody who was deaf, a young lady who taught me so much, and it was a language which I was because I'm a visual person, and one of the things I realized as an artist, that being an artist is about communication. So kind of step into the visual world of sign language, was a light bulb came on for me, and it's something which really, really resonated with me. So I was given the opportunity later on to run some community workshops where we set up an arts group and an arts cafe, and we had some community workshops which young people came to, and these were youngsters with additional needs. We had some deaf youngsters there, and very quickly I realized that space of creativity, if you allow people to make things which when they arrive on your doorstep, and they know they're going to be doing something, but when they leave your space, they've created something which was so far beyond their imagination. There is this amazing transformation that begins to happen, and you watch people. They're standing taller. They're within their power. They are connecting with something which transcends the everyday, and that's the bit where the kind of the magic happens for me. And working with young people who have got stories which have interfering with them reaching their full potential, if you can give them something which they can then redefine themselves by, and saying, I can do this in life, it shows them that anything is possible. So that trajectory of stepping on, shifting my kind of career path from one of just being an artist to working as an educator and a facilitator, took me into some weird and wonderful places. I had a couple of years working for social services, running an activity scheme for children with special needs and their siblings. And it was a baptism of fire, but in the most beautiful, beautiful way. I literally had a phone call. Somebody had stepped away from the job and they needed somebody really quickly at the beginning of the summer holidays. And I was working with around about 50 children from the age of 4 up to 18 with a huge range of special needs. And it allowed us to be, you had to be very, very creative. You had to think on your feet. You had to drop into your heart, and because every day was a new day, because things could kind of unravel very quickly, but the next day you pick it up and you start again. And we had like a project which we had the older young people. I went around all the local businesses, and I filled up my car and a trailer, and we filled the school hall we were in with scrap materials, and we built a huge spaceship. And all the older children were involved with making it. And then in the mornings, the small children the next day would come and see what had been added to it, and they could play with it. And this went across the whole of the summer holidays. And it's something the staff enjoyed doing, the children enjoyed doing, and it just brought that magic into their lives, that imagination that anything's possible. These are young people which have been given labels and are put in boxes as a result of that.
So you describe yourself as an intuitive practitioner. Do you feel that that is something that helps the people that you are helping to overcome some of the challenges in their life? It is this intuition that's the bridge that they can cross over to reach something deeper within themselves.
Yes, it's an interesting term, intuition. It's something which I've spent a lot of time thinking about, and defining myself as an intuitive practitioner comes with a responsibility, and it is about stepping in initially into yourself and stepping into that space where where your heart is open. All of us, we either we are either motivated by love or by fear. So if you're stepping into a space, particularly with people who are maybe challenged in life and have the stories that are interfering with them, and they're reliving those scripts and that trauma, if you drop yourself into that space of unconditional love for that person and allowing them to be able to step into that space for themselves, you have to drop in first and think about where your center is. You can then feel into the situation and feel where that person's coming from and what their particular needs might be at that moment in time. So it's about, you know, we're at the end of the day, we're animals, and we have various systems within our body, the flight, freeze or flight responses, which are there for very good reason. But you know, the society that we live in can bend some of those things out of shape, and we can have scripts running in our psyches, which then trigger our bodies in certain ways. So it's about bringing people into the moment and allowing them just to gently unfold and giving them their stepping stones to come out of that trauma state and that fear state to move into creativity. So that just takes that time of just sitting in the space and allowing yourself to just tune in. So that then allows that person to be able to step forward into the space that you're creating with them.
And what sort of things do you use? Is it your skills as an artisan that you are able to use with the people to provide the safety, I suppose, for that journey to happen?
One of the things that I do, you mentioned at the beginning that I'm a beekeeper. I have an amazing bakers in town here, and it can. One of the things that if I'm working outside, the first thing that I do is I light a fire, and the lighting the fire, the actual process of doing that is such an ancient process. You know, it's something which we have deep within our souls, that, you know, that sitting around a fire and watching the flames, it's scientifically proven that it can calm those the brain waves. So what I do is I go to my local bakers, I pick up some beautiful bread from them, I get some honey from my bees, and we sit down and we make a hot drink and we toast some bread over the fire. And that just the act of breaking the bread and sitting down and sharing something, the stories then begin to creep in. And then it's about finding what that person, what their expectations are of the day, what their fears might be, what their hopes are, and just starting those kind of authentic conversations. And I will take materials with me to offer them the opportunity to engage on a creative process. So my background is an artist. I've designed a number of workshops. I do a lot of traditional rural skills and things like metalsmithing, coppersmithing, nature connection, and just a wide range of different things which people can spark their imagination, maybe things that they haven't seen before. I'm a great believer in the universe providing. There is the power of manifestation. So often when I'm working with a group, things will pop up in my life, and I spend a fair bit of time going backwards and forwards to our recycling centre, and the chap who runs it locally will keep an eye out for things for me. And, you know, things like old Singer sewing machines, which have found their way to the tip. I might sit down one day and repair that with a young person, and the next day we're then using it to stitch fabric together and use plants to print onto the fabric with a bit of wood and a hammer, and you end up with something which is this creativity from random things that come together. And some things are a bit more organized. You know, I will come up with a program of work with the people that I work with, but it's about keeping them at the center. And often, you know, our education center system, there is a very prescriptive curriculum. So what I'm about is getting young people out of the classroom and get them in there to own the sessions that I work with them. And so that alchemy that then happens with that, it becomes greater than the sum of the parts, and we take it to places where neither of us could have imagined it was going to go at the beginning.
It's amazing, I have to say to you, Nick, because it is something that, in a way, reminds me of a community, a community of people that are at the heart and at the essence of humanity. That you could teach people these skills and for them to go out and to touch other people and their life. Is that something that sort of resonates in the whole thing that you do?
Definitely. I think one of the things that I've just spoken about, that kind of prescriptive curriculum. If you are an individual that does not fit into the status quo of the education system, and that may be because, and I don't like using labels, but in interest of kind of describing what I'm doing. So if somebody's been described as having special needs or autistic spectrum disorder or ADHD, all those sorts of things, they are seen as viewed as being broken, potentially being viewed as it being in a deficit position. So, they are young people who are, and adults who are coming from that place of lack. So, but if you then allow them to become part of the tribe, to see that their skills and their ways of thinking and the way that they view the world is something which they can positively contribute for themselves, but also to the people around them. It's about that empowerment, and it's about them transforming their circumstances and their true spirit coming through. I believe that we have a soul that we bring into this. We choose to be here as human beings, and the cage that can create around us from some of the unwritten rules of society that we live within. Like men should, boys should, women should, girls should, disabled people should. That word "should" can be very restricting. So to lift that and get them to step outside of that space is transcendent. It's such a powerful thing, and it enables them to understand that we are all one, and that they have just as much to contribute to wider society and to their immediate friends and family. It's magic. It's magic.
It's a beautiful work, really. It's such a noble work that you do, Nick. Now, do you just work with young people, or do you also do projects with adults?
It's the Tanglewood Project. I ought to explain a little bit more about that.
Tell us a little bit. I was going to go on to that, what the Tanglewood Project is.
So the Tanglewood Project is a project that came out of working with a youth centre I was managing for a number of years. We had a special needs group there. I could see the writing was on the wall that the youth centre was going to close with the cuts, that the austerity cuts that we had, and so it was an ambition of mine. So I spoke to the young people I was working with and saying, I would really like to do this with you, and it's something we can leave behind within the community here, that will be the young people which come behind in the school next to the youth centre will be able to use. So the Tanglewood Project is essentially building outside spaces, education spaces, and we didn't know what we were doing to begin with. We went out and bought a book on how to build a roundhouse, and I sat down with the young people, and we came up with a plan. We project managed it together, and what we ended up with was a beautiful reciprocal roof roundhouse. And I don't know if you know what a reciprocal roof roundhouse looks like, but it has a beautiful spiral in the roof.
I do, actually. I've seen yours as well, and it's quite stunning.
There's a number of people out there across the country, across the world, building these beautiful buildings. But what is wonderful about them is the reciprocal roof. Is the whole idea that each rafter holds the next rafter up, and the one behind holds that one up. So it's this reciprocation. It's like, I help you, you help me. So that whole metaphor of building in that way, and building consciously, and weaving that into the language as you build it, you then become it then becomes manifest. So it's then enables people to connect with something in the real world that that space, and I suppose it's like churches, that you walk into that kind of sacred space because that intention has been set, and instantly that you get that feedback from the building there and the people who move into it, because they are very conscious of it. And so the Tanglewood Project, it needs to involve people of all ages and abilities, because it's about going out into the woods and chopping down trees, and selecting the appropriate trees for it, and the appropriate trees for that woodland as well, and going out and coppicing and then processing that into building materials. So I've had children as young as 18 months old up to grandparents in their 80s, so it's right across the board. But what then happens is I've then gone from the youth centre, when losing my job within the youth service, which was crushing at the time. What came out of it was I'm now 9 years down the line. I'm 8 roundhouses later, and I've connected with hundreds of people across the county here, and each one of those spaces now have become a hub for people to be able to go in and use and carry on the work that we started there, but with that original intention, which is, it's I feel truly blessed to be able to go and do it, and I have met some incredible people along the way, and each building has its own resonance to it. Each one has its own character, and it's fascinating because obviously I have the luxury of being able to spend time in all of them. But you can feel the magic of each group woven into that space.
And is there a place that people can come to, Nick, for example, on your website, that they can see these buildings and know how to visit them?
At this moment in time, we do not have a specific Tanglewood building that is just for Tanglewood. They are in schools and colleges across the county. We do have aspirations, and we're in discussions at the moment, and we have found a site where that will be happening over the next few months, which is
okay.
So watch this space.
Oh, that's excellent. That's excellent.
Yeah.
Because I've seen some of the things that you've done, as I mentioned earlier, with the silversmith work that you do, and also with this. And it is something close to my heart, because I'm very much into nature and into woodland. And it's some of the places where I spend a lot of my time being there, because there is a certain type of magic to it, isn't there?
It's an ancient magic, and it's something which, as human beings, we are disconnected from it, with the screen times that we spend, the things that we want to go out and buy, and the pressures of life, and nature carries on, we were talking about the bees earlier on, and the bees, they've been around for millions and millions of years.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that was my next thing. I adore them, and please tell us more about your bees.
Oh, the bees! Now that's been a journey. They're in my DNA. They are something I just remember as a child, just being absolutely fascinated by the idea of this community of creatures that all work together and made the most beautiful structures, and the honey that came out of them. And and every opportunity, if ever I saw honeycomb for sale as a child, I had to buy it. And I was never in a position as a child to keep bees, but it was always something that I knew that I would do. And I had an amazing head of department at a school I worked in, who was a beekeeper, and we got talking about it, and he said, "Hey, I'll get you. You can have some of my bees." What I didn't realise was it took me 3 years to realise that not all bees want to kill you all of the time, and they were the most vicious, horrendous bees. And the way that I'm somebody who will go, I'll give that a go, and learn retrospectively or on the job. So I came unstuck a few times. It gave me a very healthy respect for bees, but it also made me realize that I was determined to do it. So I build my own beehives. I go out and collect swarms from some of the most amazing places. I get to turn up in people's houses.
Where do you go? Where do you collect the bees from?
So I will get a phone call. I have a page, Tanglewood Bees, on
Hmm.
Facebook. You can go and have a look on there.
Mm.
I will get random phone calls. I never know where they're going to come from. For example, I had a phone call this week from the post office for me to go and get one out of a letterbox. A couple of weeks before that, I had a phone call from somebody who rings me on a yearly basis. They have a swarm of bees that live in their chimney. They
Hmm.
moved in there a few years ago, and so every year they produce a swarm. This last year, the bees very kindly swarmed on a low bough on an apple tree, and I was there for only a short time before I had the bees in a hive, and I just sat there watching them coming and going, and like they hadn't missed a beat, and they just knew that they wanted to be there. So, and sometimes I'll end up on roofs of houses. Sometimes I will end up taking floors out from people's houses when they've gone underneath the floorboards. So, I say I never know where I'm going to find them from. Each swarm of bees is completely different. As I say, I have a very healthy respect for bees. And, I have turned up at places where the bees have really told me that they don't want anything to do with humans. And you have to treat them with the utmost respect and become a
Hmm.
bee whisperer at that point. Another
I was
bees,
going to say that actually. Are you a bee whisperer?
I am. One thing I learned very, very quickly
Mm.
is when you, and it's like working with young people with behavioural issues. It's like working with anything living. You have to. It's not about you. It's not about your ego. At that point, you have to drop into bee time, and you have
Yeah.
to use your intuition and get that feedback from the bees and step into that space with them with a healthy respect. But it's got to happen in their time, because if you try to bring it into your time, that's when things they can come unstuck very quickly.
Right. Now, what do you do with these bees, Nick? Do you take them back to your place?
So sometimes I had them nearby my house.
Hmm.
I will say that I have very, very understanding neighbours, but there was a point where we all mutually agreed that maybe they shouldn't be next to the house, because I'm collecting swarms from places which on the day I might collect the bees, they might have a lovely temperament, but once they've settled into their hives, they might be a bit more defensive. So I
Mm.
don't keep the bees. I live in a beautiful I live on the Tarka line railway, which runs from Exeter up to Barnstaple, and I'm in deep mid Devon here, and I live in the old railway cottages
Oh,
next
how
to
beautiful.
the track, and
Mm.
the little trains chug up and down the track here. But also I have, there's a half a dozen houses here, and to have the bees on the doorstep, it's great. It was convenient for me, but it didn't always work out quite so well. So
Mm.
I am very, very lucky. I have two sites. I have woodland, which we use for tanglewood work as well, which is over near Bickley, which belongs to an old chap called Farmer John Greenslade, which anybody who lives in Devon's ever listened to Devon radio, he's on there on a regular basis. And he has planted up his land there. He had TB on the land there 30 years ago, and stopped putting nitrates on the land because he didn't have the cattle there anymore. And he started seeing wildflowers that he hadn't seen since his childhood. So he had an epiphany moment and thought, well, if I haven't seen these flowers since my childhood, what about
Mm.
the children which have come since then? So he started planting, and it is the most beautiful woodland and meadowland in the county. It's award-winning, and quite rightly so. He's such a generous-spirited guy. He heard about what we were doing. I went across to meet him, and I do a lot of the Tanglewood work from there, but I also keep my bees there. And and and
Oh,
and
okay.
and,
That's
and
lovely of him.
and all beekeepers, most beekeepers have two sites, because there's the age-old rule that you move your bees either 3 foot or 3 miles. So you have to run across 2 apiaries, and I have another woodland just up the road from me on an organic farm. So yeah,
Hmm.
I'm very, very lucky where I get to keep my bees.
Now, do you have products from the bees? Do you have the honey and
I
the propolis and the royal jelly?
I do. I don't take the royal jelly from the hives, but I
Okay.
have propolis, which is absolutely, excuse my dog barking in the
Oh,
background.
that's okay.
Uh, I, from the hive, I take wax from the hive, which I hand on to various people, and they do craft-based products with it. I use it for various things. I also, the roundhouses which we build, I make an amazing varnish out of linseed oil and beeswax. And so all my roundhouses have this incredible kind of glow to them. Propolis is an absolutely amazing material, and
Yes, it
so
is.
so propolis is, you know, it was used widely up until the invention of antibiotics,
Mm.
and it is transformative. I have had, in the past 9 years, I've had a handful of days off work, and I put that down to the propolis. I make my.
And do you take it? Do you take it daily?
I don't take it daily. If I can feel that my body it maybe needs a little bit of helping hand, if I get a little bit of a sore throat,
Okay.
or
And how many
something like
drops
that.
would you put into water?
Now, you see, I've got to the point where water doesn't come into it. It's the full fat kind of,
Oh, you do it.
straight to,
Okay. All right.
yeah. But I wouldn't recommend that to people starting out on trying out propolis. But you know, I know my body, and I know that, and I know that the blend that I use it works really well. So, and my family use it as well. We use it for all sorts of things. So, you make balms and different things like that out of it as well.
How do you sell it at all?
Not commercially. It's something, I'm a great believer in, kind of the barter system, and also that you know, if somebody needs it and they cross my path, you know, they'll go away with some propolis. So the bees, they don't make me money. They are very much an intrinsic part of the Tanglewood Project and who I am, and you know, I feel privileged to have them in my life, and you know, it's about sharing that with other people. So you know, I get through a lot of honey in the year with the sessions that I do, you know, making the toast over the fire. So
Yes.
but yeah, but if anybody, you know, if anybody wants any advice on beekeeping or the products of the hive, yeah, please get in contact. Find me on the Tanglewood Bees page.
Yes, that's interesting. I think that it's a fascinating subject, Nick. And there's a lot of people now that are really getting into beekeeping and realizing, I think, awakening to the importance and the magic of bees, because I think it's something that no one really was aware of until now, when we've suddenly seen a huge decline in them.
Yes, and what's been fascinating for me is the journey of how you should keep bees. Now, there's lots of, you ask 10 different beekeepers their opinion, you will get 10 different answers. And you know, I've experimented various different types of hives. I keep my bees in a biodynamic way. They're kept in what's called rose hives, and you know, traditionally what beekeepers do, they go on a beekeeping course and they're taught to keep bees in a particular way. My feelings is we need to kind of explore, you know, what our relationship with bees and why we want to keep bees. And what we do is we keep bees in a box, we medicate them, we put things like queen excluders in there, and then we're having problems with bees, because you know, bees they've been around for millions of years. They're the experts on who they are. We're not. So you know, so the hives that I keep, they have no queen excluder in there. All the boxes are all the same size. So the bees get to choose what their brood shape will be like in there. So each year is a very different year for the life cycle of the bees. So you know, the weather conditions and you know, it can really affect them. And you know, when they've swarmed and you know, where that colony is a particular time of year, they need to be able to be adaptable. So keeping them in a square box has its limitations. So what the rose hive enables the bees to do to form their colony in whatever shape they want, in whatever position they need to in the hive, and it really works. I've not medicated my bees for a number of years, and you know, I've had some amazing results. And you know, and I'm sure you have heard, and other, you know, your listeners have heard about the varroa mite. My bees, touch wood, they found their groove with what they're doing, and I have very few problems with that. So, yeah,
that is
good.
quite amazing, really. And it's sort of heavenly, isn't it? That sort of work is heavenly, working with bees. And it's really this, I don't know, the beauty of life to be able to do that. And I've always wanted to ask a beekeeper this. They say that a bee and dances in the figure of 8. Is that true?
So that's the waggle dance. Yes. So what the bees do is they will, I've never had the chance to kind of have the conversation with a bee in that way, exactly what they're doing. But what is surmised from it, and there's been a lot of research done on it, is it's the number of rotations they do and the intensity of the dance then tells the other bees where the pollen is, and they will orientate themselves to the, to the compass and the sun, and give them the information of where their honey crop's happening, where the nectar flow is happening. So then the other bees are able to follow them, which is just incredible. And you were saying about that kind of the kind of magic of them. And it's, I'm a great believer that, life is life, and we are all connected with that. And I think that the collective consciousness that bees have is something which I think that we have that intrinsic connection within us. And I think the recent circumstances we've all had right across the world is that realization that we are all connected. And I think we were all living within our own little bubbles, going along in our own individual spaces. But I think, that shift in consciousness, I think the bees are a mirror of us. They're one of those marker species that they are being threatened, but that also means that we are as well. So, nature is shouting at us at the moment, and bees are one of those incredible species that give us so much. So yes, they need to be watched, but also, as Brother Adam said at Buckfast Abbey, listen to the bees and they will tell you everything you need to know. And
Wow.
yeah.
Oh, what a beautiful thing to say. It is.
Yeah.
It is. It's something really quite mystical. I've been fascinated, and I have several family members who keep bees abroad, and I have this fascination with them because there is some wisdom there. I feel that if they could speak, which I'm sure they speak, and some people can have the ability to listen, they would really give us all the wisdom that is needed for life.
I couldn't agree more. And as I said earlier, I feel privileged to have them in my life, and to actually drop out of my me time, my work life, my family life, and just drop into that bee time, which stretches across millions and millions of years. You can feel it. You can feel it, and that programming they have within their DNA and their soul to make such beautiful structures. They just know what to do. And
Yes.
but they're on that knife edge. They're at the forefront of everything that's going on within our dynamic world. And they're struggling. But I will say, when I first started out beekeeping, I was a rarity. There's a swarm went through here today. One of my neighbours said, "Oh, I thought it was one of yours." I said, "Well, actually, I haven't got any bees here at the moment. I'm waiting for the phone call for somebody to say there's a swarm of bees landed in our garden." So, and I've got somebody else up the road looking for some, so they'll go that way.
And how many bees do you have, Nick?
I have. I haven't counted them individually, but I have 12 hives. So that is a lot of bees. So
That's a lot of bees,
and
isn't
it
it?
ebbs and flows throughout the year. I've been up to about 15 hives, and I comfortably, a dozen hives is plenty for me.
Yes, yeah. And does it require sort of daily attention, the hives?
Now, I must confess, I let the bees, to a certain extent, do what they need to do. I do fairly regular inspections during swarming time. As I said, my bees are in a woodland which, they're not going to cause too many problems. One of the issues is with beekeepers, if they've got bees in a built-up area and they're not doing swarm inspections, you can end up with them in very problematic places. One of the things, often I collect my swarms of bees from nature. I put bait hives out for swarms. So if somebody has a particular problem in an area, I'll put a bait hive there, and I'll get a phone call from them to say that that their hives are now full. Please come and pick it up. I also make log hives. I make green man log hives, so the bees fly in and out of the mouth of the green man. So they're out up in the woods. So it's about, sometimes it's just about nature having the bees back. So I do inspect them. I obviously make sure I'm responsible, make sure they haven't got any diseases that can affect other beekeepers and things like that. Touch wood, to this day, I've never had any notifiable diseases. So it's about finding that balance. You can be a bee botherer as much as a beekeeper. So it's a bit of a fine line, and I choose to just react to what my bees are communicating to me rather than what I think they should be doing.
Yes, and there's some things that you've said there, Nick, that sort of I want to touch upon with regards to the bees, that they are a reflection in a way of humanity and how we are. Do you think that all this that we have gone through and that we are going through as a collective, really, it's something because partly we needed to be brought back to our natural way, to be brought back to who we really are?
That's a big question. Thinking about it, I need to let that settle in me. One of the things which on my personal journey over these last few weeks, it's about deciding what our truth is. And I think a lot of people, and the dialogue that seems to be kind of emerging, that people have been able to step out of off their hamster wheel and step into a space of actually being able to look at themselves. Now, some people have been very fearful of doing that, and some people have been unable to connect with that part of themselves that is that higher self, that true soul of our, that's centered within us, that being that chooses to be here in the human form. So, and we've touched a number of times on the idea of stories, and we can build the scripts around us that can create fear in our lives. So I think to be able to step out of our day-to-day scripts that we're running and be able to tune into ourselves has been an incredible opportunity for many, many people. I think there is also the other side of that pendulum swing, that people have dropped into the fear state and have got lost in that and have been listening to all the narratives and all the conspiracies and all the different noise that's going on out there, and have swung further out. So I think for the people who are able to find that resonance within themselves and to transcend that and to find their essential element within themselves and connect with that, I think is an amazing time in history. And I think we have potentially a responsibility to ourselves to keep within that heart resonance and to be able to share that with others. And I think there are a lot of people who maybe don't have that level of language or understanding for themselves to be able to step into that space. But I think there are people who have really refined and toned and honed their understanding of themselves, which will leave them to be better equipped to transform their lives and then potentially other people around them.
Now, because we've all gone through this, and each with our own story, and that has led us to certain places within ourselves, I believe. And I think it's been challenging, both personally and professionally, whatever we're doing, whether we're working, whether we're not working, but us as, beings, as you said, having a human experience, which I really believe that to be the truth. How have you overcome these challenges, Nick? And what sort of things have you learnt that you would like to share with the listeners?
So my path, if you look at my logo, the Tanglewood Project, and it's often only in retrospect you realise these things, and and basically, and I didn't realise at the time, it's like two trees of life coming together with the roots and the trees interwoven into each other. And it's about those threads where people's lives cross over, and that kind of, we talked about the alchemy, where that magic kind of happens. And and there's some significant people throughout my kind of journey that have come into my life at certain times that have shared their magic with me, which I've then able to interpret it in my own way and then hand that on to others. And one of the biggest events in my life for me was when I trained to be a youth worker. I had the privilege of being asked to work with a group of young people as an honorary young person and receive training. And it was in a framework of language called protective behaviours. Now, this was something which was invented back in the 1970s by a group of women who were in a school, and they were working with children who were victims of various different circumstances in their lives. And what they wanted to do was come up with a framework of language which empowered them to stop being victims and to be able to take responsibility for their own lives, and change the stories and the scripts that they were victims of. And there's two themes to this, and the first one is, and it's quite a simplistic framework of language, but we talked about the whole thing of being an intuitive practitioner. What this enabled me to do was to then give me a roadmap to be able to navigate my way around my practice. And it was such an empowering thing. And somebody explained to me what this is about Frary Theory. Now, this makes me sound very intellectual. I'm not. And Bob Paulo Freire was a guy who worked with factory workers in Brazil who they were being oppressed by the bosses they were working for. And so what Freire talks about is the authentic word has the power to transform, which is a mantra of mine. It's something which I think about, and if something's not quite sitting right, I will drop into my heart space and think, why isn't this working? And it's then about finding those right words. And protective behaviors did that for me. It was such a powerful thing. So the first theme of it is we all have the right to feel safe all of the time. Now, I'm sure all your listeners will agree with that. We all have the right to feel safe all the time. But what I really like about it is the idea that every right that we have is balanced by a responsibility. So if we are bringing something to a situation and we feel we have the right to do that, is then thinking about what the balance is to that. What is our responsibility to the people around us? We are ultimately responsible for our own behavior, but we are responsible to the people around us. As a parent, that was massive for me to realize that actually I'm responsible to my children, not for my children. So that then is followed on by the whole idea of the difference between feeling safe and being safe. And what protective behaviors does, it's about encouraging that adventurous approach to life. It's not about containing people in their comfort zone that they never get out of. It's about encouraging that adventurous approach to life. So they get out their comfort zone into their adventure zone, but without ending up in the disaster zone. And so how do we do that? We check in with ourselves, and we listen to ourselves, and we listen to those early warning signs, those incredible systems we have in our body that indicate that actually we're getting out of our comfort zone. And why are we there? Is it something that is fun to feel scared with? Are we risking on purpose? So, and you can hear the language in there, which I'm using, for all of us. It's a really important thing to do. And I think, what we found in the current circumstances, that right to feel safe, we have a right to feel safe within it, but lots of people haven't felt safe. So, and the second theme to it is, and I was originally taught, and the language has moved on slightly since then, is no thing is so awful or small that you can't talk about it with someone. And what they say now is actually we can talk with someone about anything, even if it feels awful or small. And it's that idea of how do you decide that something's awful or small? Is finding those people to talk with. And that whole idea of developing support networks and having people in your life that feed your soul, allow you to troubleshoot problems, and people who have really good listening skills. And underneath that then is I'll go through it very quickly, the 7 strategies, and I'll just dip into a couple of them. And one of the things which I really like is their whole idea of the unwritten rules of society, which all of us are governed by, and there's those little scripts that we run in our heads, that, you know, it's that should word that, you know, I mentioned before. And it's that whole idea that, you know, people should behave in a particular way. Why do we have those unwritten rules within in us? And it may be to do with our family, it may be to do with the culture that we live in, it may be to live with the communities around us, it may be the school children go to, or the school we went to, and we pass things down through the generations, and not necessarily because we've been doing things all our lives means that we should carry on doing them. And sometimes we get challenged by people in the most beautiful ways, and we then realize that actually some of the things which we thought were right and good for ourselves are not serving ourselves or the people around us. And they can be very, very deep-seated. So it's about creating that environment around us, of having that support network of people who will challenge us within that, but in a very safe way. So, you know, that was a very kind of key point in my career, which enabled me to navigate around and feel very safe in what I was doing. And I've seen some amazing transformative things happen as a result of giving that language to other people, providing them with a toolkit to go off and get out in their adventure zone.
In their adventure zone. That's an interesting thought, because we are a lot of the time afraid, aren't we, Nick, to take that risk, to live. And fear, albeit an illusion.
It is an illusion. And you know, I've been listening to some of your other podcasts, and it's lovely listening to people coming to the same conclusions, but through their own journeys and their own language. And you know, that idea of fear is, you know, potentially what is going to happen in the future, what you know, and often what is in the present moment, you can deal with it. You know, I had a beautiful moment with the young person I was working with, and he was a young person who had suffered from brain injury. He had other things going on, and he was in an emotional, he dropped out of his kind of resonance, and he caused a lot of damage to himself, to the building around him and people around him. And I just crossed his path at the right moment. I wasn't there when the event had started, but I was able to pick him up, and we had this discussion around, you know, the fact that he managed to take responsibility for himself. And at that moment, a ladybird dropped on his table, and he looked at it, I looked at it, and I went, that's a gift. You have been given a gift here. And he said, what on earth do you mean? And I said, well, that ladybird is a sign to show you that you are able to calm yourself down. I said, next time you find yourself in that circumstance, think of the ladybird. About an hour later, he found himself in a situation where he was unable to manage it in a way that was conducive to him or the people around him. And he was in mid-flow. And at that point, I was just, think of the ladybird. And instantly, he was able to drop into that space. And, you know, to be able to give him the language which then builds around that and those small tools. And one of the things that the protective behavior talks about is that safe space exercise. So you actually construct a place in your mind that is safe to you, that you can then drop into. So that fear state that we're in, it's a choice. Often it's a choice that if we're going to stay in it. So if you give yourself alternatives, you then have got the choice. Sometimes you might feel you haven't got the choice, but if you have those strategies to step out of it, it's transformative.
It is about, again, I think you're very right there, Nick, because it's about finding that inner sanctuary that belongs in all of us, and we all have this personal space that is private, that is safe, and we sometimes look outside of ourselves for that, and we then become anxious also because we're looking for something that is outside of us, when really what the soul is saying, it's all within us, isn't it?
Totally. And that is the space, that the resonance that's out there, which is such a rich place for us to be able to step into and just if we can accept that for ourselves, and it is always there. It's a bedrock that we can all stand on and navigate from. So it's about then stepping back and witnessing your life and those stories and those scripts that we build up around ourselves that can become the obstacles or the cages that we are unable to unlock. But if you then just quieten yourself down and find your center, it's always there. It's always there. So it's just about finding those strategies about how to get back to it, and I have struggled with anxiety in my life. It's something which has been a real double-edged sword, because it's something which it has given me the gift of understanding that other people may be feeling that in that moment, and some people can just be using bravado to try and make a situation different. But if you come from that place of authenticity and truth, other people can step into that as well.
Yes, it's about being authentic, your real self, because I think we all have anxiety and we have the ability to deal with it. It's, as you said, we have to find the ways, the tools, the methods that work for each individual, because every individual is different. Now, tell us a little bit, because you have a new project, don't you?
I do.
And I want to know more.
Okay, so this is a world exclusive. Yeah, I'm a great believer in divine timing, and I find things in my life, if I try and push things, it can become complicated, it can become stressful, and it's those moments where things just line up in the most beautiful way. That's where there's that fertile ground, that you've got that space for things to grow, because you're not trying to hold on to it. And often, if you have ambition in your life, if you try and grasp it too hard, it's like kind of trying to grasp smoke.
Yes, that's true. That's very true.
So when those gifts come, when that divine timing comes, when that affirmation comes, and you're on the right path, that's the food of my soul. And I had a beautiful occurrence in my life a number of weeks ago, and this was before the lockdown, and it was before our world, as I said, there's no normal left in the box. We're all finding our new way. And there was just a little gift that kind of came through, which, for whatever reason, I thank Spirit or God or whatever you want to call it, for just aligning this in my life. And what happened was, I had a friend of mine call me completely out of the blue, somebody I've not spoken to for quite a number of years. And he was inviting me to meet with him because he had a project that he wanted to run by me. Now, what came out of that, the original project we haven't done, because what happened was we got together, and everything we've just been talking about, we managed to drop into that space with each other, which was just pure creation. It was alchemy. So what we're doing is, we've set up a project, and which is called the Wingsmith Project. And it's the idea that we are going to be creating a beautiful sculpture. Now, obviously, with what's gone on with Black Lives Matters and the heritage that we have, and with that heritage that we have within our communities, is something which we want to move on from. To be creating a sculpture at this point in time is quite an emotive subject. But what we have done is, the intention behind it is that we want to get people into working with Tanglewood and with the Tanglewood ethos. And Matt, the chap I'm working with, he's Matt Dingle. He's a blacksmith, and I used to work with him 20-something odd years ago. And I used to do fabrication and design work for him. And I ended up in his forge chatting, and we were talking about the idea that every person who comes into the forge and goes through that process of the alchemy that we've talked about, we wanted them to go away with something. And one of the things which I picked up from him many years ago was the skills to be able to do coppersmithing. And I've woven that into my work on a regular basis. And we talked about the idea of potentially people going away with a talisman. And I said, well, one of the things which, I've done a lot of, I've made a lot of leaves. And then I said, the other thing I've made, which has been really beautiful, is feathers. And, throughout history, the feather and wings has been a very powerful symbol of, within Christianity and other religions, the angels, within
Mm-hmm.
the Native Americans, the whole shamanic protection of the animals, and it's something which the wings symbolizes that whole idea. It's the one thing that human beings can't do. We can't fly, so that symbolism of that is massive. So I had this moment of realization that actually, if we can get people into the forge, let's make some wings. Let's make some wings by members of the public and frontline workers and uniform groups as a collective, so we can then add to these beautiful wings as the workshops happen, where the wings can grow. So as we then descended into the pandemic, one of the things which came to the front was the whole idea of the frontline workers and the amazing work that they're doing out there. And one of the experiences that Matt had, he'd spent some time with a lady who does work with uniform groups and frontline workers, and she does bird therapy. And one of the birds she has actually has been known to wrap its wings around people who are in trauma. So we spoke to her, and she sent us some feathers, and we've started to do the designs. We've got some sponsorship for it. So we are going to be creating these beautiful rings that people will be able to step into and feel protected. So there's people who are out there doing this amazing work can feel that energy that's been woven into these beautiful feathers and then made into wings, and just feel that we've got their backs. And
how beautiful.
Absolutely stunning. So
Wow.
yeah, and it's one of those once in a lifetime projects. There are talks about us taking it beyond the local vicinity and maybe doing it on a wider level, and we're in talks with some very interesting people at the moment who are very motivated with it. So if there's anybody out there who's listening to this who maybe can contribute in whatever way or help us on our way, please get in contact or want to be involved. So it's an exciting time, and what's happened is, because I've stepped off of my normal day-to-day life, I've been able to really drop into that space, and I've spent a lot of time reconnecting with my creativity and be able to set that intention and weave that magic, and it's coming together, and it's going to be happening very soon. And yeah, my heart sings. And
how beautiful. Now tell me, what are you looking for? What sort of help? So for the listeners out there, what sort of help do you need?
So one of the things which we want to do is we want to go and work with some of the more vulnerable groups within our society. So we're looking for sponsorship. So down the line, what we're going to be doing is potentially inviting people into the forge, that they will then pay a fee for doing that, which will then fund for us to working with other people. Because at the end of the day, I'd love to be able to do it free of charge, but actually I need to find a balance within my life, and one of those is kind of meeting the material costs and some of the other associated expenses with it. It's a £30,000 sculpture, because it's going to be big and it's going to be beautiful, but what we say is going to cost us to get it out there and out there in the public and participate is going to cost us £12,000. We have £6,000 at the moment, which is fantastic. The NHS are on board with it, which is absolutely brilliant, and we want to get it out there. So
are you doing a GoFund page or anything like that?
We will be. What my next step is to get our Facebook page up. We will be getting a website shortly.
Okay.
There will definitely be a Facebook page out there. The next steps will be to get the website out there. So that will be the initial contact. So if you're interested, find me. You're welcome to find me on Facebook, Nick Mussell. See the Tanglewood logo, hook up with me there, and I will be putting the information out. But it's very much about those kind of personal relationships and developing the story around it, and getting people to own it and walk the path with us. So yeah, there's
how delightful. This is absolutely delightful, Nick, and it has such an effervescence of spirit in it that I think it will move a lot of people's lives.
Yes. Yes, and I say, and there's ambitions beyond this, but I can't talk about that at the moment, unfortunately.
I
But
know.
yeah,
Me and Nick was talking, I have to say to the listeners, me and Nick were talking about this, and he wouldn't share it with me, I have to say, because he wanted to share. You are the first people now in the world that he shared this project with. So you're very honoured to hear about it, because we wanted to get that magic of that moment, didn't we?
yeah.
So when something's sort of born into a space, it never happens a second time. The birth happens but once. So anyone out there who would like to help Nick, please get in contact. Now, Nick, where can people get in contact with you to find out more about your work? And do you still do commissions for your silversmith work and your
I do.
artwork?
I do.
You do.
I have an Etsy shop, so you can find Tanglewood Arts on Etsy,
Mm-hmm.
all one word.
Okay. Uh-huh.
You can find. I have various different Facebook pages. I have the Tanglewood Project, Tanglewood Arts, and Tanglewood Bees. I have
Mm-hmm.
I have a Facebook groups as well. You can find me there. So make contact with me on Facebook. I'm on Instagram as well. You can find me there. We have a website, the Tanglewood Project. It could
Mm-hmm.
do with a bit of updating at the moment because things have moved on greatly. So yeah, there's various different ways. You can even email me. So tanglewoodproject@btinternet.com.
Okay, and people are free to welcome, to feel welcomed into your world. And, you never know, you're willing to possibly collaborate also with other people, like-minded people.
Always looking up for collaborations and different ideas. And one of the other projects which I'm involved with at the moment, which was running alongside this, is that we are setting up a business which is going to go alongside Tanglewood Project. One of the things which we've been very well aware of, we make these beautiful buildings, which, at times I've had 150 people involved with a build, and they're built across often from sort of Easter time through to sort of end of October, and it's quite a long, protracted, beautiful process, but it's a big undertaking. So my second strand at the moment is that we've also I've got some amazing people which I'm working with, and we want to be able to offer the opportunity for people to have similar spaces within maybe it's in their home or within their school or college or community group. So we are designing at the moment a building which is just as beautiful as our roundhouses, and they're going to be called Hive Hubs. So it's a flat pack version of our roundhouses, and
Mm-hmm.
the customer or the people we're working with can get as involved as they want to within it. They can be decorated by the groups we're working with. So if go and have a look at the Tanglewood page and see what we're up to on there, and you can see the story unfolding.
Brilliant.
I've
What
got
a
to the point in
brilliant
my life.
story.
Yeah,
Wow.
I'm 50 this year, and it's all coming together. So, and I hope there's a real authenticity to it. And I think it's over 4,000 people following me on Facebook now, and I love the diversity of the people which cross my path, and the magic we often create together. So you never know what's coming next.
You never know, and you never know who you're going to meet, because, as we always say, everything and everyone arrives at, your famous words, at its precise divine moment.
Yeah.
And even this meeting with us and the listeners, you never know who's listening. It's a moment really to be joyful about, because it's, souls meeting on another level, as well as on the physical, of course. It's on another level that you never know who you're going to inspire.
No, and so for me, it's always about putting that intention out there. That I was reminded of a conversation earlier on today. Many years ago, I went to a garden party where it was a beautiful house that had been divided up into apartments, and a friend of ours had moved into there, and there was a couple there. They'd just come back from Africa. They'd been doing some aid work out there, and they were out there on the front line, living through hardship, but actually, really transforming people's lives. And my wife Melody turned around and said to the chap, I've got so much respect. I'm in awe of what you are doing. What an incredible person you are. And he turned around to Melody and he said, what you have to remember in life is that we do everything for ourselves first. I do it because I enjoy it. And I think that, and that honesty was so refreshing to me. And I think that idea that, you know, if you are serving your needs in a very authentic, open-hearted way, and you are then able to give to others in an unconditional way, because you're being fed in this beautiful way. So it becomes this reciprocal relationship, which then people can then step into that. So yeah, it's life's great mystery, and
Yes.
you know, and what we have learned from this circumstance. You know, 8 months ago, none of us could have even imagined that the whole world was going to shut down. So the possibilities that opens up is endless. So, you know, let's create some magic. Let's see where this takes us. So all you wonderful people out there who are tuning into this energy, yeah, let's keep doing it. Have the faith.
Let's do it. And you know, when you were talking now, Nick, I imagine this beautiful, I don't know, it was a mix between a phoenix and a peacock in flight. And you know, there is a beauty and a true, you know, authentic feeling about really cherishing who we are as individuals. Because unless, as this person that you were speaking to, unless we find our joy, we cannot share that joy. It's impossible. We have to become all that we are, because we already are, but it's the realization, it's the awakening of that. And through this lockdown, I think all of us somehow, you know, every living being, everything on the planet has been brought back to that pivotal point inside of us to see that actually we are beautiful and we can together create so many beautiful things.
I'm speechless. Yes, all of that. And you know, some of the most damaged people I have worked with, I've found such beauty within them, and what they offer us to be able to transcend that and step into that space is just such a powerful thing. So, you know, if they can do it, if they can overcome some of the adversity they've had in their lives, and you know, they have been wounded, so in turn we're wounding others, to be able to step outside of that and that, to not perpetuate that, you know, we can all do it. And you know, it's finding our different ways. We've all got our own journeys to go on. We've all got our own fears, but you know, it's stepping into that and grounding yourself in that, and also realizing that those are transitory feelings, and essentially as beings, we have this infinite capacity to love ourselves and love others.
Yes, and love is the answer, isn't it, to every question. Love is, in reality, the only real thing that can nurture us and give us this breath of life, I think.
I agree, and I think what it is, once you open yourself up to that, it's also allowing yourself to see the signs. And for me, there's those little markers, those little synchronicities, and those people that come into your lives, that, you know, to be open to it and be ready for it and look for those patterns and those things. That, you know, I have a beautiful story that made me realize that I was on my kind of essential journey. And I think, you know, if I look back on my life, I can see those points where I've veered off of that, and some of the damage that's caused to myself and potentially other people around me. But when you're walking that path of transformation for yourself and authenticity, there can be some beautiful things happen. And if it's okay, I'd like to share this story with you.
Of course.
You know, and this was a year into setting the Tanglewood Project up, and I had set up built the first roundhouse within my old job with the youth service. I was then working in a school where they said that they'd like a roundhouse, and everything along the way just dropped into place. If we needed a farmer to turn up with a tractor to get the wood for us out of the woods, he turned up. If the materials that we needed were at the right place at the right time, the right people turned up. And all of a sudden we had this amazing network of people around us that just made it happen. And it was one of the easiest things. And it was at that point I had taken that leap from saying I'm employed to going self-employed. And I was held. I just felt held along the way. And we got towards the end of the build, and we had built this beautiful structure. We put the roof on there. We'd had compost, which had been donated by a local community group, and we put it through this grader. And so we had all this lovely fine compost, which we put up on the roof that had been lovingly spread out. And then it rained, and we had a leak. We had a leak in the roof, which was just, we've been sailing all along the way in such an amazing way. And the chap that I've been working with, who'd worked with me at the youth service, who then came to work with me building the roundhouses, we were stood there cursing the fact that, that we had this leak. And I went, stop. We need to have gratitude at this point. Everything, we have been blessed on our pathway here. And so, and I said, I'm not a religious person, but I'm a spiritual person. I said, I don't think, and by this time we were climbing up on the scaffolding onto the roof. And I said, at this point, I'm looking around me, I'm feeling this, and I feel like we've been looked after by the angels. The angels have been on our side. So at that point, we're knelt down on the roof, just scooping into the compost where we think this leak is in the roof. And the first thing I pull out of the compost is a piece of pottery with a golden angel on it. Now, there is no way in the world that should have been there, because this compost was graded down to such a fine grade. It'd been put out there lovingly. So, but the story doesn't end there. It doesn't end there. I had this beautiful golden angel in my hand, and we were both absolutely in awe of the fact that the last words that had come out of my mouth was, we can't deny that angels are on our side. And this golden angel popped into my hand. So I took a photograph of it, and I thought, actually, it needs to stay here. So I popped it up into the eaves of the roundhouse. I returned a week later. Thought we'd repaired the leak. I thought I'd go back and have a look, and everything was dry, everything was fine, and the angel was gone. I thought, well, obviously somebody obviously needed the angel more than I did. Now, my son at the time, he was 5 years old, 6 years old. He then went to that school and had some big issues there, and some things, some adults there didn't do what they should have done around my son, and he was having a very, very tricky time. And right in the middle of this, he picked my iPad up, was scrolling through it, and he said, this angel, I know where it is. The day before, he'd been doing a litter pick at school, and he'd found it underneath a hedge, and he'd picked it up and he'd moved it and he'd put it somewhere where he knew where it was. So I was then able to have the conversation with him about the whole idea that we are looked after, that there is something out there that I cannot tell you exactly what it is, but it's something which is far beyond, the realm that we live in, and that you are looked after and that you are loved. And so he then, the next day, he went into school and he brought the angel back. And I have it here. It's here with me now, sat next to me. So, yeah.
What a remarkable story, Nick.
Amazing. And I have many threads like that throughout my life. And, I believe that if you live with that honor and integrity, there is that gift out there for us to tap into.
And that's the beauty, isn't it? That's the magic of life. They're the secret ingredients that turn, everything into gold.
Yes. Beautifully put.
And on that note, I could talk to you about so many things, day and night, because you're such an interesting and wise person, really, Nick. And wow, there's so many things there to think about. There's so many things there.
I will return. I would just, my comeback to that is wise. I have some wisdoms. I'm human at the end of the day. I have anxieties and stresses like everybody else, but it's just that deep belief within me that there is that space that all of us can step back into, and I forget at times. I get lost in my stories, and I have some beautiful. I sit in circle with a bunch of guys. I helped set up Menfest Festival last year. It's to have the people around you who are able to understand that resonance in life and gently bring you back into it when you're lost. That is the biggest gift that we can have as human beings.
I believe you, and I totally agree with you. And there's something about listening to you, Nick, and your stories and this natural way of life, the way of really back to the essence of who we are, because everything that you do is back to nature. It's bringing us back to nature. And, you know, it's something that, you know, I really hope the listeners will get in contact and that you can build some connections there, because that's partly something that I like to do, is to bring people together in a way that, you know, it's then to have, you know, a collection of people that can build a community that can make a difference in the world and are really the sustenance of society. When things like this happen, there has to be a place, I think, more places where people can turn to and ask for that help that you spoke about earlier.
And that kind of neatly brings us back to, you know, we all have the right to feel safe all the time, and
Yeah.
that's a very, very personal thing, and you know, we have a responsibility in that for ourselves and to others. So,
Yeah.
you know, and it's about us collectively getting out into our adventure zone right now and making that comfort zone bigger and bigger and bigger, and inviting other people into that space. And you know,
Yes.
we have such a beautiful opportunity at this moment in time. And but the other side of that pendulum swing is the fear, and that's the motivator. And if we can bring people to step outside of that, what a beautiful thing to happen.
Yes. Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on today, Nick. It's really, truly been a pleasure, and I've learned so much about life and bees and life, and you know, it's wonderful. It's like a fairy tale in a way. I feel like I've been part of a fairy tale these past sort of hour or so. And I always ask my guests at the end of the show to give a little bit of wisdom, a little bit of advice that has helped them through their life and that can possibly, you know, shine that light across the world to other people.
Wow. Okay. I think to understand that there is always, always, always somebody out there to talk to. Always. However desperate things get, there is always somebody to talk to. The one thing that works for me, if I find myself out of that pendulum swing where life is just got so chaotic and the noise in my head is overwhelming, I take my shoes and socks off and just go and stand on the earth and feel my roots going down into the earth and just connecting with Mother Earth, and she will hold you, you know, and then you can then once you've got that grounding, you can then start to take those steps forward again and just slow things down.
Yes, that's a good idea, actually. It's something that I do, and it helps a lot. And people laugh at me, I know, but I I really don't mind, because I know what works for me, and I think it's all about finding what works for each one of us. And I hug trees and all sorts of things because I'm totally in love with trees. So that's something that is a little bit of magic in this world, isn't it?
It's essential.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
and it runs through all of us, you know. This
yes,
planet
yeah.
is alive, we're alive, and we are all one, we're all connected. So yeah, she's out there, you know.
Yeah.
And if you're feeling ungrounded, we all know it, on such a deep level. So yeah, get your socks off and get your feet in the dirt.
Yes, very good advice, very good advice. Thank you, Nick. Come again. Tell us more about your project.
I would love to.
Once it goes, you know, live, and so to speak, and, you know, and all your other sort of adventures that you have, and come and share them again with us. You're always very welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I wish you all the very best in life and in all that you do, because I'm sure that you will bring always a little joy to everything that you do.
Thank you for the opportunity of allowing me to share. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Take care.
Bye now.
Okay, bye. Bye. Nick Mussell, what an extraordinarily wonderful life he leads within the nature of all things. Thank you so much for joining me today, and until next time, take care and lots of love.
Thank you for listening to Secrets for an Inspirational Life, brought to you by your host, Mimi Novic. Please remember to subscribe to the podcast, and see you in the next episode. For more information about Mimi Novic and her books, music, and inspirational work, take a look at her website, www.miminovic.co.uk.